Sarah Mitchell stood outside Brennan's general store with her daughter's frozen hand in hers, knowing the door wouldn't open. Through the frosted window, the storekeeper's wife saw them and turned deliberately away, disappearing into the shadows of flour sacks and canned goods. 4 coins lay in Sarah's palm, exact change for a week's flour. Emma shivered beside her, 5 years old and trusting her mother could fix anything. But Sarah couldn't fix the town's judgment. She knocked anyway, once, twice. The door cracked open. "We don't serve your kind," the woman said, each word sharp as February wind. "Pastor's orders, you understand." Emma looked up, confused. "Mama?" Sarah had no answer that wouldn't break something in her daughter's heart. She turned, walking down Main Street with her head high and her hope dying. Townswomen pulled their children inside as they passed. One man spat near Sarah's feet, not quite hitting her skirt. This was Redemption Springs, Wyoming Territory, 1887, a place that believed in second chances for everyone except unwed mothers. Emma stumbled in a frozen puddle. Her small cry of pain echoed in the cold air. No one moved to help. Sarah bent to lift her, mud soaking through her worn coat, when a calloused hand appeared. "Easy now, little one." The voice belonged to a man Sarah had never seen, weathered face, trail dust on his boots, eyes that had seen hard things. He helped Emma stand, then tipped his hat to Sarah without expectation. "Name's Jacob Brennan. Ma'am, my camp's got hot coffee if the child needs warming." Sarah's instinct screamed danger. Every promise from strange men had cost her. But Emma's lips were blue, and the town had just declared them invisible. "Just warmth," Sarah said quietly. "Nothing more." Jacob nodded once, understanding everything she didn't say. "Nothing more." They followed him beyond town limits, 3 figures against an endless gray sky. Behind them, the church bell tolled like judgment. Ahead, a small fire flickered, the only warmth for miles. Jacob's camp was simple: a dying fire, worn bedroll, saddlebags that had seen 1,000 trails. He poured coffee from a battered tin pot without asking questions, and that silence felt more generous than charity. Emma crouched by the flames, hands extended. Sarah stood apart, unable to fully accept kindness she couldn't repay. "Hardtack's not fancy," Jacob said, offering food. "But it's filling." Emma ate hungrily. Sarah picked at hers, watching this stranger who helped without demands. Through careful conversation, her story emerged in fragments. The traveling salesman who'd promised marriage and disappeared. The town that had tolerated her until the pastor's recent sermon turned tolerance into exile. 3 days until her landlord evicted them. "There's the old Patterson cabin," Jacob said, staring into the fire. 5 miles north, empty 2 winters now since the family passed. "Good bones, if you can stand the isolation." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, quickly smothered. "We can't afford land. It's unclaimed. Squatters' rights, maybe." He paused. "I knew the Patterson boy, owed him a debt from the war." Emma, warming now, looked at Jacob with pure trust. "Are you staying here?" Something crossed Jacob's face, old pain, quickly hidden. "No, little one. I'm always moving." But the way he said it sounded like a wound, not a choice. Sarah made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "If you helped us reach the cabin, winterize it, I could cook proper meals, mend clothes. I won't take charity, but I can work." Jacob studied her, saw pride that wouldn't bend, only break. "A week's work, fair trade. Then I ride on." They shook hands like business partners sealing a deal. Emma beamed. not understanding the fragility of adult promises. First snowflakes began falling. Jacob kicked dirt over the fire, efficient movements revealing a man used to leaving, but when he gathered supplies, Sarah noticed him touching a locket at his throat, brief, unconscious, heavy with memory. He caught her looking and turned away. "Storm's coming," he said. "We should move." The trail to Patterson cabin wound through pine forest, turning white. Jacob led a borrowed mule carrying supplies. Emma perched atop, bundled in his spare coat. Sarah walked beside him, matching his steady pace without complaint, despite the cold biting through her thin boots. Emma filled the silence with questions about everything: trees, animals, why snow was white. Jacob answered each one patiently, his voice gentler than Sarah expected, from hands scarred by hard living. "You're good with children," she said quietly. Was. One word: carrying years. They made camp at dusk, around the fire. Walls came down in small increments. Jacob spoke haltingly about a wife and infant son taken by cholera 5 years past. He'd been 3 towns away, gambling away their savings, chasing fool's gold. "Came home to graves and an empty house," he said, staring into flames. "Haven't stayed anywhere since." Staying means failing people who trust you. Sarah understood that kind of running. "I stayed, tried to belong. They punished me for loving wrong." No self-pity in her voice, just fact. "They took everything but my name. Then they took that too. Now I'm nobody's daughter, nobody's wife, just that woman." "Your daughter calls you Mama," Jacob said. "That's a name that matters." Sarah's throat tightened. Emma slept between them, small and trusting. They reached the cabin at full dark, a shadow against shadows. Roof sagging, but walls solid. Inside smelled of abandonment and mice. But the fireplace still drew when Jacob lit kindling. He surveyed the work needed: new shingles, window repairs, chimney cleaning. More than a week, much more. Sarah saw his calculation, released him from obligation. "You've done enough, Mr. Brennan." But Emma, exploring with a stick, called from the corner, "Jacob, which room is yours?" The question hung in cold air. Jacob looked at his saddlebags, then at the nail protruding from the wall. Made a choice that felt like stopping a 5-year run. He hung the bags on the nail, didn't say he was staying, just stayed. 3 weeks passed, like water finding new channels, slowly reshaping the landscape until what becomes what is. Jacob repaired the roof at dawn, hammer blows echoing across empty land. Sarah hung laundry between trees, clothes snapping in wind that smelled less of winter each day. Emma chased the 3 chickens Jacob had somehow acquired, her laughter filling spaces that had been silent too long. They built routines that felt like family, without anyone saying the word. Jacob taught Emma to whittle, his large hands guiding her small ones. Sarah cooked actual meals: rabbit stew, biscuits, things that required staying in one place long enough to let dough rise. Small intimacies accumulated. Sarah mending Jacob's shirt, unconsciously embroidering his initials. Jacob building a rocking chair for the porch without being asked, but reality waited beyond their small sanctuary. Jacob rode to town for supplies and returned with half what they needed. Men had sneered, women whispered loud enough to hear. The sheriff, decent but weak, had pulled him aside with a warning. "Calloway's asking questions about that land," the sheriff had said, "and your arrangement with her. Association damages reputations." Brennan. Jacob's jaw had tightened, old violence stirring beneath careful control. "Good thing I don't have one to lose." He told Sarah none of this when he returned, but she read refusal in the gaps between what he'd brought. That evening, she confronted him on the porch while Emma played inside. "You're risking everything for us. Your livelihood. Maybe I'm doing it for me," Jacob interrupted. "Maybe I'm tired of running from everything that might matter." First real admission, first crack in his armor. That night, a late winter storm trapped them inside for 3 days. Forced proximity accelerated what was already inevitable. They talked until Emma fell asleep between them. Then kept talking in whispers, shared stories that had no place in daylight. Comfortable silences that meant more than words. On the third day, Emma woke them at dawn with a question that stopped breath. "Are we a family now?" Jacob looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Emma. Neither answered directly, but their silence was an answer too. Outside, the storm passed. Inside, something unnamed had arrived. April arrived with robin song and melting snow, revealing brown earth like skin healing from frostbite. Sarah woke before dawn and found Jacob already outside, kneeling in dirt, planting seeds in careful rows. She watched from the window, understanding what the garden meant. He was planning beyond tomorrow. Days acquired a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like living. Jacob repaired Emma's broken doll with unexpected tenderness, whittling a new arm and sewing it with horsehair thread. Emma clutched it like treasure. Sarah saw the father he would have been and ached for all three of them, past losses and present possibilities equally sharp. But emotional barriers persisted despite growing intimacy. Jacob still slept in the barn some nights when feelings pressed too close. Sarah still flinched when he reached past her for tools. Reflexes from abandonment not yet unlearned. They danced around what was building between them, too afraid to name it. Then Emma, playing near Jacob's saddlebags, found the locket. She opened it innocently, brought it to Sarah. "Who's this pretty lady?" Inside, a woman's portrait and a lock of baby hair. Sarah's heart sank, realizing how little she truly knew this man she was falling for. Jacob appeared in the doorway, saw the locket in Emma's hands. His face drained of color. He took it, not roughly, but desperately, and walked out without a word. Sarah found him by the creek, shoulders shaking. She approached slowly, said nothing. Sometimes silence is the only honest response. "I failed them," Jacob finally said, voice breaking. "I wasn't there when they needed me. If I'd just been there." The grief poured out. 5 years of self-punishment and loneliness. Sarah held him while he wept. Emma appeared, wrapped small arms around both adults. In that broken moment, something healed. Later, Sarah returned the locket gently. "They'd want you happy. Jacob, staying sad doesn't honor them. I don't know how to be happy anymore. You're learning. We all are." That night, Jacob slept inside the cabin for the first time, in the small side room, propriety maintained, but under the same roof. Morning came. Emma woke them shouting about the garden. The seeds weren't sprouting yet, too soon, but her hope was real and contagious. Jacob and Sarah exchanged a look across the breakfast table. "We're really doing this." Outside. Spring's first green shoots appeared on distant hillsides like promises kept. Jacob rode into Redemption Springs on a bright April morning, unaware he was riding into an ambush. At the cabin, Sarah taught Emma letters while birds sang outside, the terrible contrast of peace before storm. The town council waited at the general store, Pastor Hutchins, rancher Calloway, and 3 merchants who'd profited from keeping others desperate. They surrounded Jacob like wolves. Calloway, wealthy and land-hungry, played his hand without subtlety. "That Patterson land's mine by rights. Old debt. Legal claim. You got 7 days to vacate. Brennan. Jacob's hand twitched toward his hip. Old instincts rising. That's a lie. Prove it. Calloway smiled like a man who'd bought the only judge for 3 counties. Railroads coming through. That land's worth real money now. You think you can squat with your whore and her bastard and nobody'd notice? Blood roared in Jacob's ears. But before he could move, Pastor Hutchins stepped forward with a different threat. We're concerned about the child's welfare. Mr. Brennan, an unwed woman and an unmarried man living in sin, that's grounds for removal to a proper Christian home. Sarah's nightmare. Weaponized. Jacob rode back to the cabin, shaking with rage and fear, told Sarah everything. In desperation, he made an offer that came out wrong. Marry me. If we're married, they can't call it improper. I'll give you my name. Make it legal. Make you safe. Sarah's face went cold. I won't be charity, Jacob. I won't trap you with obligation. That's not... I've been someone's duty before. The man who left said he'd stay out of duty. It's worse than being abandoned, being someone's burden they resent. I'm not him. Then why are you proposing? Love or fear? They'd never fought before. The words cut deeper than intention. Jacob stormed to the barn. Sarah wept in the cabin. Emma hid under the table, small world collapsing. An hour later, the sheriff arrived with papers. 7 days to vacate. Violence implied if they resisted. Sarah read the eviction notice with trembling hands. Emma emerged from hiding. Asked the question with no good answer. Mama, where will we go? Sarah looked at their small life, curtains she'd sewn, Emma's drawings, the rocking chair, the garden, and began packing. Outside in the barn, Jacob saddled his horse, considering riding to town and ending this the old way, with fists, with violence, with the man he'd been trying not to be. The locket swung on its chain as he gripped the saddle. Jacob sat alone in the saloon that night, untouched whiskey glass before him. His knuckles were white around the glass, every muscle coiled for violence. The bartender, old acquaintance from other towns, other troubles, watched warily. You planning to drink that or break it? The bartender finally asked. Haven't decided. Heard about your situation. Calloway's a bastard, but he's got the law bought. Then maybe I remind him what law doesn't cover. Jacob's voice was flat. Dangerous. The bartender leaned close. That who you want the little girl to remember? Another violent drifter? Or the man who stayed and fought right? The words landed like a punch. Jacob saw his reflection in the mirror behind the bar, hard eyes, tight jaw. Every inch the dangerous man he'd been. The man who'd lost everything that mattered by being exactly this. He stood, left the whiskey untouched, and walked out into cold starlight. Meanwhile, at the cabin, Sarah packed mechanically. Each item in the bag felt like surrender. The embroidered shirt, the tin cups they'd drunk coffee from, Emma's whittled animals. Emma sat on the floor, clutching her repaired doll. Mama, where will we go? Sarah had no answer. Every direction looked like defeat. Then Emma stood, walked outside to the garden plot, knelt by it. Mama, we can't leave. The plants will die without us. Sarah joined her daughter, saw the tiny green shoots Jacob had planted. They were growing, really growing, out of the mouths of babes, truth. Running again meant teaching Emma that dignity required constant retreat, that home was impossible, that love was always temporary. Sarah made a decision. We're staying. But the bad men, we're staying, with or without Jacob. We're staying. This is our home. Jacob returned at dawn. Sarah met him on the porch, Emma asleep inside. They looked at each other, both wearing the same resolve. "I'm sorry." They started simultaneously. Stopped. Tried again. Jacob spoke first. "I proposed wrong. Like you were a problem to solve instead of—" His voice broke. "Marry me, not for them, not for the land, because I love you, because I'm tired of being afraid, because you and Emma are my second chance. Sarah, if you'll have me." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "I love you too, you stubborn fool. Yes, but Jacob, they'll fight harder. Let them." He took her hands. "We're not alone anymore. Families stand together." They kissed as sunrise broke over distant mountains. Emma appeared in the doorway, saw them, and cheered loud enough to wake birds. The decision was made. They'd fight, legally, socially, and if necessary, physically. But together, Jacob had one more card to play. Sunday morning. Jacob rode to the county seat before dawn, found the address he'd carried in his pocket for 5 years, Patterson's widow, his war buddy's mother. She opened the door, recognized him immediately. "Jacob Brennan. Thought you were dead." "Close enough, ma'am, but I need your help." She listened to his story, then disappeared into her house. Returned with a document. Legitimate deed transfer to Patterson land. Dated 6 months before her son's death. Jacob's name, honoring the life debt. "Thomas wanted you to have it. Said you saved his life at Shiloh." She pressed the paper into his hands. "Make something good there. My boy would have wanted that." Jacob rode back to Redemption Springs with legal truth in his saddlebag. At the cabin, Sarah dressed Emma in her cleanest clothes. They'd made a decision that felt like walking into fire. They'd attend Sunday service. Together, publicly, they walked down Main Street, Emma holding both their hands. Windows closed as they passed. Some people stared, others looked away, but they didn't stop walking. Inside the church, they sat in the back pew. The congregation buzzed like disturbed hornets. Pastor Hutchins began his sermon, targeting them directly with barely veiled condemnation about sin and corruption. Mid-sermon, the bartender stood, then the schoolteacher, the blacksmith's wife, a dozen others, quiet dissenters, tired of judgment disguised as righteousness. The bartender spoke clearly. "Pastor, with respect, is this who we are? Folks who turn away children, who punish a woman for being abandoned, who threaten a man for showing kindness." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the congregation. Calloway erupted. "This is about law. Brennan's got no claim." Jacob stood calmly. Produced the deed. "I do now, legal and witnessed. Patterson left it to me for saving his life in the war." He looked at Calloway without blinking. "You want this land? You'll have to kill me for it, and anyone who stands with me." His hand didn't touch his gun, didn't need to. Others stood beside Jacob, not just the dissenters, but townsfolk sick of Calloway's bullying. The sheriff, emboldened, made his choice. "Deeds legitimate. Calloway, your claims dismissed. You threaten this family again, I'll arrest you." Calloway stormed out. Defeated. The pastor stammered. Lost control. People didn't embrace Sarah as they filed out, but several nodded respectfully. It wasn't acceptance, but it was the beginning of something better. 6 weeks later, mid-May, the cabin had transformed. Curtains billowed in warm breeze. Emma's drawings covered one wall. Tools were organized, and the rocking chair sat on the porch like it had always been there. A traveling preacher arrived at Sarah's request. Not the town pastor, a different man who'd married frontier couples for 30 years and asked no questions beyond, "Do you love each other?" They stood in the small cabin, Emma between them. The preacher spoke simple words about commitment and family and choosing each other daily. Jacob placed a ring he'd forged himself on Sarah's finger, rough work, but made with his hands. Sarah Brennan. She had a name again. By choice this time. Emma scattered wildflowers she'd picked that morning, declaring it decoration. They ate rabbit stew with vegetables from Jacob's garden, their first meal as a legally recognized family. That evening, they sat on the porch in comfortable silence. Emma played with her doll at their feet, the kind of silence that meant home. Emma pointed suddenly. "Look, Papa. More geese coming back." She called him Papa naturally now, the title earned through daily presence. Jacob smiled. Everything comes back, little one, given the right home. Sarah understood the double meaning. He was talking about himself, about her, about all broken things that heal when given safety. She leaned into his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her. Emma climbed into Sarah's lap. The sun set behind distant mountains, painting everything gold. The garden thrived. Chickens pecked in the yard. Smoke rose from their chimney, the signal of life continuing. They had names. They had land. They had each other. Sarah looked at Jacob, then at their daughter, then at the home they'd built from nothing but determination and love. "We made it." "We did," Jacob said quietly. "We really did." Emma, drowsy in her mother's arms, asked the question one more time, needing the reassurance children always need. "And we're staying forever, right?" Jacob and Sarah answered together, their voices blending like harmony. Forever. The land, once cold and empty, bloomed. Winter was over. Spring had come to stay, and 3 people who'd been lost found each other and called it home. The end.